And we are live. Make sure we live before we get to this introduction. All right, we live. Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the May 11th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. We got a dope show on tap for you on this hashtag You Good Man, Men's Wellness, something Monday. We're going to be talking about Mike Jordan in The Last Dance. Listen, if you've been watching me on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, you know that I've been uber critical of Mike about this idea of greatness that we have, this idea of leadership and what it looks like. So I asked some dope brothers, you know how it is on Mondays. I bring the brothers in so we can have open and honest dialogue just about various topics so you could get this real insight. Salute to those who are watching on Facebook Live. Props to those who are watching on YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Quadify LLC. That's QUADEFY LLC. When you hit the subscribe button, you get me like closer to my goal of monetizing on YouTube. I'm literally like 99,694 people away from getting like $3. So I need y'all. I don't have the Umar video, but listen, you know how I feel about that. You know how I feel. So please, again, donate on Cash App. Why? Because we giving you real information. And this costs. This costs so I can bring it to you every day. So without further ado, I'm going to get these guests on the screen. So in the top right corner, we have Mr. Kabana Frempong, who is the CEO of Green District Media. In the middle at the top, we have our good brother, master's level social worker, Temple University graduate, Michael Olnick in the building. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have our resident Negro professional dancer, Zane. Salute to you, Zane. Underneath Michael, and we didn't do this intentionally, right? We want to have the white guys one on top of the other. We didn't do that, you know. But we got the good brother. He's a lyricist. He is the University of Penn strength and conditioning coach. We have Mr. Stephen Brindle in the building. And last but not least, we have the infamous one. No, that's not Moses who you saying, right? That's not, but he the Moses of Philadelphia, right? Not Moses Malone, but Mr. Greg Corbin, just philanthropist, Negro scholar. I'm trying to think of what Chappelle said. What Chappelle said on the intro of that Talib Kweli album. He the N-word that invented the Nike swoosh. You know what I mean? We got Greg Corbin in the building. So salute to you all, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Peace. Thanks for having me.
No doubt. So this conversation, we're gonna jump right into it, man. I don't know if you all have been watching The Last Dance, which is chronicling Michael Jordan's last season with the Chicago Bulls, that 1998 season where he won his 6th championship. But there's been a lot of conversation about who Michael Jordan truly is. And I think this is the first real insight that we've been able to have into just who he is outside of being a basketball player, but who he is as the man. On the last episode, they really showed him and just the emotions related to the death of his father, James Jordan, who was tragically killed going on about 26 or so years ago. And, he was very open about it. It was probably one of the driving forces as to why he left basketball. And so with me watching that, I empathized with him. I saw the trauma that he experienced, but I also saw an asshole. And I know my mama might be watching. Mama, I meant to say that, so don't text me afterwards like you usually do, like watch your mouth, baby. But what I saw this asshole who was super mean to people. I know we laud him for his greatness on the basketball court and more importantly, for the success that he had on the basketball court. But what I saw was somebody that didn't know how to engage with people. And so it had me think about, what does greatness entail, especially when we talk about individual greatness? can it, this idea of greatness, do you have to be an asshole? Do you have to be a jerk in order to reach the pinnacle of individual greatness within your respective field? And so, listen, I want to throw that out to you, brothers. If you've watched the doc, just to get your thoughts on that, and then just on the idea of greatness in itself. So we'll start with we can start with you, Kyle.
So is obviously in the era that we're in where it's just so much information. When we grew up and we kind of like fell in love with Mike, or we put him on the pedestal that he's on, we didn't know all this information. We just knew what we saw, right? Just as fans, it was just like, oh yeah, he's winning. He's got all these accolades, so he's got to be a good guy. But I remember, as I started to mature and I started to become a man, and you started to hear certain things, you were just like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound like really, the type of person that I would be, or the type of person I would even classify myself as. I think it's important to just kind of like keep people. I want to say this, but not. I remember what did. He had like in his comedy sketch. It's kind of funny. You were referencing David Chappelle just then, but in one of his comedy sketches, he was like, "Yeah, when the world is ending, I don't really care what Ja Rule said." He was like, "Yeah, don't save me, Ja, whatever." Right?
Yeah.
Like, you're an entertainer, and I think that we kind of like put him in a particular place that just wasn't what he was supposed to be. It was like, okay, you're on the court, you're a great basketball player, and that's it. And he gave us a whole lot of reminders, like, like the when he wouldn't endorse the candidate, which was something I totally forgot about. I do remember the stuff about the what was it? I don't know.
Republicans buy sneakers.
Yeah. I do remember the line, but I forgot kind of like the context from which obviously the line was said. But I think we have a proclivity to kind of like do that, where it's just like, oh, okay, this person is, this person excels in this one particular area, and then we think that they automatically have to be excel, period, or just be awesome, period. Like, nah, he's a great basketball player. He won a lot of championships. That's it. But Yeah.
Anybody else? Just give their thoughts on Jordan if you haven't seen the series, and then on The Last Dance if you have.
I mean, I haven't seen the series. I don't have cable. I'm guessing it's on ESPN or something, right?
Yeah. You know what? It's actually on Netflix too. I don't know if you have Netflix.
Oh, okay. I do have the Netflix. I'll have to check it out then on there. But just speaking to like the idea of greatness, I think greatness in sport is kind of different than greatness in life necessarily. I think typically, like there's something about sport that calls on us to look for like that killer out there. We want someone that puts on blinders and just puts everything they have into their craft. But they do, because they're a public figure. I mean, I think Jordan would have really struggled today because he didn't have any duality to him being a public figure. Like, he was like, this is my thing. I'm an amazing basketball player, and that's what I do. But as far as like speaking to like societal things that are going on, he had his mind on his business, and that was it. Yeah. So I think he would have really struggled. And I mean, look at somebody like LeBron, who gets trashed all the time from both sides of the aisle, even though he is great in our day and age, and he actually approaches like societal type stuff. So I just think that, yeah, was he kind of like a shitty dude? Kind of, man. But that's what I think when you asked, do we have to be an asshole to achieve a certain amount of greatness? Sometimes you have to at least separate yourself from the herd if you're really going to reach that next level of great. And I think that does in some cases lead us to cutting people off or being kind of cold and detached. And I think that's kind of like the cost you pay for that kind of greatness.
Yeah.
There's so one of the there's a leadership style that is that's something that I kind of like lean into, which is like a servant leadership style, right? And it creates one of the things, as I was doing like some studies, they kind of have like they have this imagery, right, where I think it's like a wolf pack or something, some type of like wild animal, and it's a bunch of them. They're like crossing, like I guess some type of like frozen tundra type of thing or something, and the picture shows like the one of the whatever wild animals or whatever. It's like a pack of them, and then there's one in the back, and then they said that this is the actual leader of the pack, right? So I think when we look at Jordan, right, and we look at that whole era, because a lot of them kind of like felt like that. Like you had Charles Barkley actually say, "I'm not a role model," right?
Yeah.
But let's look at like prior the decade prior to that. Your Kareem Cinder or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? Jim Brown, Bill Russell. Like, so these guys had like a point of reference, right? To be like, oh, okay, it's like they, like you said, they made the decision. Oh no, I'm going to remove myself, for whatever reason. Maybe it was to quote unquote appeal to a larger audience. Maybe it was, I don't know. I don't know what the reason was, but those guys, they had a reference. They were able to kind of just like follow the blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And so I want to say, like with this conversation, listen, I haven't formulated any questions. You know what I mean? This is just like us sitting around with no cameras, nobody watching, and just being real and having honest conversations. So feel free again to jump in and speak your truth, because I know, again, like I said, I've been getting skewered from people just based on my opinion of Mike. And to sum it up, it was just this idea of, we celebrate him for the end, right? And the end being the championships and him being the greatest of all time. But when I look at the means that it took for him to get there, not the attributes that we all laud, right? Like the staying late to practice. We saw that throughout the throughout the documentary. Him being tough on people, but I just looked at it as he crossed boundaries a lot of times, right? So with him punching Steve Kerr in his face, and Zane and I was talking about this in the group that we just had. There was, in listening to Steve Kerr tell the story about getting punched in the eye by Michael Jordan, there was a certain romanticization of that experience. And we tend to do that so much. So we romanticize how, uh, you know, how passionate, quote unquote, passionate he was, the desire that he had. And we use those code words to cover up for, you were an asshole, you crossed boundaries, you were very disrespectful to people as human beings, right, in order to achieve this goal. And so when I think about just this idea of greatness, I had to take a step back and start thinking about just different people, right? Who we deem great, and is this just a common trait that exists among all of them? And so again, I don't have the answer to that, right? Like I look at Barack Obama, and I'm like, in the eyes of everybody, he's great, but I look at him as being like an anomaly, right? To this idea of celebrity. And so again, you feel free to comment on that, give your thoughts on MJ in the documentary. We can go. Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
So this is my thinking. Y'all hear me clearly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So language dictates culture because people hear language and then they respond to that language based on how they define it, and then they act it out. They project it. They ask people, why aren't you involved with the same social norms and social agreements that I'm involved with, right? So what I'm thinking, just off of the bat, is who defines greatness, right? And is that coming from a Eurocentric point of view, right? A very individual point of view, or is it based on community? right? We may celebrate the end when Jordan gets his team to win the championships or pulls the best out of people, even if it deems to be abusive, right? I think what's interesting is this is a generational thing as well, right? If you think about Bobby Knight and Michael Jordan, they saw eye to eye in a lot of ways. They both had fierce competitive rage almost. And if you've seen the Bobby Knight 30 for 30, you're like, yo, Bobby Knight was out of his mind.
Yeah.
And people want their savior. Like the campus legit, when they were firing him, the kids protested, don't let Bobby Knight go. It was that much emotional rage built around this man who was throwing cheers across the basketball court for years, who was pushing players, who probably fought coaches. You know what I mean? So when I think about Jordan, I'm just thinking about in what eyes are we talking about greatness? Yes, he was ambitious. Yes, I played with players like Jordan. Yes, I probably was that player maybe 4 or 5 games out of my career that was a jerk and getting on somebody too hard as if I wasn't demoralizing them because this is what we were taught. And so we cannot ignore what people are conditioned to do and what they internalize, but we also can't get them to escape responsibility for doing that. Now, what I will say is there are a lot of, you have Arthur Ashe, there were a lot of players who were humanitarians and philanthropists, right? And the one thing Jordan made clear was like, yeah, I didn't publicly support him, but I did financially support the Democrat that was running in North Carolina. But the one thing that was clear was it seemed like Michael Jordan understand brand recognition better than most athletes at an earlier age than anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude would not cross certain boundaries, but when the cameras were not rolling, then it became certain dynamics start to play out. So I don't want to say too much too fast in this conversation. But I think we have to explore who's defining what greatness looks like, because a lot of people in today's society think greatness is 1 million followers on social media and you doing your thing. But in reality, your house ain't put together. You can't hold a relationship. You ain't got X, Y, and Z. So it's this smoke and mirrors game that America teaches us how to play. And now we have all these cameras and Michael Jordan's in a position to control the narrative and story. He wants to tell it. And that's why we're starting to hear it.
Yeah, word. Stephen, I want to get to you, Steve, because you work with athletes on a daily basis, right? As a strength and conditioning coach at a Division I college. So what has your experience just been when we talk about this idea of athletes, their desire to attain greatness, and how that impacts how they're showing up with regards to their relationship with others, with relationship to themselves, and a relationship with just the coaching staff?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. Just to give you a quick backdrop. Yeah, I've been working with Division I basketball players now for close to 13 years. Spent some time at Temple and then Pitt, and then I've been at Penn for a while. My primary responsibility is the men's basketball team. I'm on the road with them. I'm at every practice. I'm at every game. I'm in the film room with them. I eat meals with them. We have a group chat, and where we're discussing some of these things. We have a sports psychologist on staff, and he'll meet with us regularly, even now, still through Zoom, and we're having discussions about tough issues often. And so I'm around athletes all the time, every single day. I was never like an exceptional athlete. I know, Phil, I know you from powerlifting, which I've been successful with that, but
yeah,
I was just a okay high school player and high school basketball player. But now I've been able to excel with strength and conditioning and helping to lead and guide these athletes. But when I'm watching, I've watched every episode. I'm glued to the TV, and I think what I messaged you earlier was like that. I would say there's a certain level that greatness that Jordan had with his leadership abilities. I would actually look at him as a good leader. In his eyes, he was doing it the way that he thought it needed to be done. But I don't think we can excuse how you treat others when, like you said, Phil, like crossing certain lines, certain boundaries, like you just sock a teammate in the mouth or you're completely demoralizing. Like, I think there's a certain aspect in which as a leader, as Michael said, you have to separate yourself from others. And sometimes it's going to lead to some loneliness, and you're kind of like separate because you're so elite. And you have this driving passion, and you have this driving competitiveness, and you want others to obtain that. You want others to achieve what you want to achieve. And in his mind, he thought the only way was to be this jerk who's cussing them out and maybe physical with them at times, which I don't think that's the only way. In his mind, that's what he thought was the way to get it accomplished. Because I think you have to, if a team is going to be successful, the best teams I've been around, and I've been around some good championship teams, they hold each other accountable. There's discipline. There's standards that are set. Even for myself and my coaching, I'm big on attention to detail. I'm big on showing up on time. I'm big on doing the little things right. Do the little things right, then you're going to do the big things right when it's like a big game or whatever. And so I think you have to hold others to standards. You have to set standards, hold others to those standards. There needs to be discipline. There needs to be accountability. And to me, the best model of that I've seen is Tony Dungy. And I've read all his books, the Hall of Fame coach who was with the Colts and with the Bucks.
Yeah.
And the way that he did it was through meekness. It wasn't through being a tyrant. It was through he was strong-willed. He had his beliefs. He had his lessons. He conveyed those to his athletes, but he was a man of faith, and he didn't have to cuss out athletes or do anything like that. So I do respect MJ for that fire and that passion, and it's easy for us to sit back, and I do think he made some mistakes, but in his mind, he was doing it what he thought was the best way. Yeah. And I think people followed suit. Like even you see Will Perdue, he was like, yo, it worked. Like he wanted us to win, and it worked.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective, no doubt. To show him some grace, right? He did say that his brother Larry was that way towards him, right? Like he was very in your face, aggressive, physically aggressive. And Mike, in order to survive in that sibling relationship, he had to adopt that personality. Again, and I think Greg talked about it, this idea of learned behavior, right? Because that's exactly what it is. However, right, and I would still give Mike a pass if in reflection, he would be able to say, yo, I wish I could do it over again, right? But he doesn't have that level of self-awareness. I think it manifested itself. It showed itself at the Hall of Fame speech where he was coming at the boy that took his spot on the freshman team. Like he brought him to the Hall of Fame speech to embarrass him, right? Like we laugh at it, but it's just like, it's nuts. Like him talking about his kids, and it had me wondering, does Mike have any friends? Number one, does he have any strong relationships? We know about him and Charles Barkley, how he stopped being friends with Charles, and Charles is literally hurt by it. Like every time he talked about it, Charles is hurt because he criticized him as an owner, right? So he can't even take the criticism that he's doling out, especially when it's being doled out in love. Like I always tell people, and we want to get your thoughts, Zane. I always tell people, like I started reading the Jordan rules. It came out probably about 91, 92. And I only started reading it because, I listen to Bomani Jones and they have a little book club they doing. And I'm sitting here looking at this documentary like, yo, this is bullshit. Like y'all have no idea what this man was doing. And he controls the narrative, right? Like it doesn't have when Bill Cartwright told him, yo, if you phase me out the game, you'll never play basketball again because I'm gonna take you out. Right. It doesn't have him in the arguments with Horace Grant and him calling Horace Grant stupid and illiterate and just saying all these things to him. And so, it just has me thinking, like, I don't think the world really knows some of the details because I don't think they really want to know. I think you said it, Cobb. You don't really want to truly know about your favorite athlete. Like, you don't want to know AI had his wife outside. Right, you just want to know AI is partying and hula hands and he go play ball. You don't want to know the negative about about the athletes that you look up to, because then they'll have you questioning, who you are, why should you look up to them, and should you? You know what I mean? So, what's your thoughts, Zane?
So my first thought is I'm not sure that that's true, and I'm only saying this. I'm saying people respect violent behavior. People respect violence. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but we live in a society where a president gets elected because he has a violent streak, right? So you can't say that at least 50% of Americans don't laud power.
Yeah.
Now, what do we do with that? And that power is the power of violence. There's no other way to walk around that. So to say that in a lot of people's eyes, they were separating his talent from his personality. No, they liked, and I'm not a sports person, but I'm listening to this conversation. I'm saying they liked the fact that he was that kind of person. That solidified what they thought of as manhood is, right? And then I'm not sure where we had this where I read this, but it might have been my old director that just published a letter on his webpage. His name is Yuri Killian. I think I could be misquoting this person, but he was saying he goes through all of these bullet points about how we need to become better people. And he says, let the warriors be the sportsmen and not fight real wars, because that's really where we've transferred to a certain degree the violent behavior that we can't really portray in society. We can't really, if you're going to be a good human being, you're not trying to be violent. You're trying to work towards something else. Most of us are not doing that. But if we're saying that we're trying to be good human beings, we're not trying to be violent. But in the sports arena, you have a pass in that space, right? Yeah. So how do you truncate? How do you compartmentalize that behavior from what society allows them to do, right? He was being everything that he thought he should be. And you can't neglect the fact that personal relationship with his brother is how he survived. Those were his survival tools. That was the first thing he learned. Those were the first tools he learned how to survive, which was Greg was saying. That's how he learned. He learned that in the home. So, and all of us do that. We take those tools and we don't change them until we figure out something different, until somebody says something or we get enlightened in some area or some moment that we have to turn around and look, or if we go into therapy, right? Or if we go into therapy and start self-examining. So I think if we're talking about greatness, the part of him that I think you're criticizing was his humanity. But what maybe we can learn from him is like he became drunk on that, and he never had what is tragic is that he didn't have somebody who could face him and sort of break that and unlock that. And that if he's still being that way today, like there was nobody in his life that could turn him around, that could open that up and show him something. You know what I mean? That's what I find like interesting. Like we could be an asshole, we could be the biggest assholes, but somebody has to be able to say, look, that shit that you're doing is fucked up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, sorry.
No.
Sorry.
Listen, man. Sorry, Mom. But Zane is an adult. No, I think you bring up a great point when we talk about, we talk about accountability, right? When he was the greatest player, right? He went into a situation in Chicago, which was a relatively bad sports town at that point in time. When he got there, he come in and takes the league by storm, right? So he's the best thing since pants with pockets, right? And so he doesn't have to answer to anybody, right? Who's going to be able to check him? And the way he views it, if you're not on par skill-wise, then you cannot say anything to me, right? And so the way that you get my respect is you have to literally be in the trenches with me. You have to be equally as violent, equally as dirty in order to get there. Like I remember reading like Stacey King, like hated Stacey King. Like Stacey King's super soft, right? But this guy, who was his name? Neely, Joe or Greg Neely, something like that, right? He wasn't the best player on the team, might be the worst player on the team, but he was out there grinding with him, right? He was physical, he did the dirty work, and he did his job. And I think when we talk about that accountability piece, part of that, the reason why it wasn't there is because, again, you didn't have strong leadership from anybody else. So,
and I think also if you follow the war analogy through, you don't want somebody who's going to blink, because in your mind, like when I watch brothers allow themselves to do things in sports that they don't, you see folks crying, you see folks hugging, you see physicality that you never see outside of the sports world that is, restricted. Like the passion that's involved in professional sports at any level of sports from an outsider looking in is like, it's like war. You know what I mean? It's like, so you're going to follow a warrior in the war.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. I know you want to say something.
Yeah, because I think that's kind of like when Zane first said warrior, it right away set something off in my head. Because listen, on the court, on the field, whatever the sports thing is, you are in the trenches. You do want someone that is unflinching. And when we say that there's other ways he could have led, I don't think there are, because that is who he is. That was his leadership style. That is what he knew. If he tried to come at it in like a meeker, like pulling everybody together and being more communicative and not being so sharp, that wouldn't have been him. And I want to read something real quick. It's a quick line and it hits on this. And it's the conquerors are merely those among men who are conscious enough of their strength to be sure of living constantly on those heights and fully aware of that grandeur. It is a question of arithmetic, of more or less. The conquerors are capable of more. So Jordan was in this space where he was so aware of how good he was and what he was capable of, that he had that drive, he had that fire, that he expected it was either like, you're with me or you're getting out of my way. And I think we got to allow him to have that, like kind of hold both things, like allow him to be that person he was on the court and not hold him to certain other standards because he didn't want them. You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to, why does a person have to be all things to all people?
Greg, like he wanted to chime in on that. I got something to say about that too. Go ahead, Greg.
I think, first of all, this is great points. Everybody's making some powerful points. We live it like taking the context, right? The context is generation by generation, things slightly get better. And I think, Zane, you just mentioned about survivability and the skill sets that we get from our parents and how we're raised. They're in some ways doing what it takes so that we can become older. We get the privilege to go back and be like, hey, you did this wrong, and that was insensitive, and this is wrong, and that's not redeemable. The reality is this. We live in this time now where everybody can pull up people's receipts and demolish them for not using the sense of discernment that they would swear they would have used in the same dynamic, in the same idea. You're not these people. And honestly, it really is challenging, because it's called the Puritan culture, where people want the perfect person, but it's always the people who are probably just as jacked up requesting of the behavior. And so that's something to take into account. And I think just it's not reality. Like, here we are holding people on trial in 2020 because they didn't behave the way 2020 wants somebody to behave, when that wasn't like it was 1996.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. There's plenty of players who are like Jordan. They just didn't win. And maybe, to your point, Zane, they weren't violent enough, right? They didn't represent the Roman gladiator mentality enough, right? We don't remember Hakeem Olajuwon, but he was one of the greatest players. Soft-spoken, educated, very, very discerned, was about his business just like Jordan, different type of intensity, right? We forget those 2 years when Houston went back-to-back because Jordan was gone, right? Like, we talking about the whole story. Let's talk about what came before Jordan. The ABA collapsed, and then a lot of superstars like David Thompson and Dr. J went into the NBA, right? So people were just starting to get a nuanced understanding of what business was as it was to be an athlete. Like, people weren't thinking about think about it. Jordan in his last 2 years got paid over $30 million per year. I still remember it being unheard of to see somebody get paid $36 million. Yeah, he knew his worth, he knew his value, and I don't agree with everything he said in this documentary at all. But I'm also, to Michael's point, I'm never going to be Jordan. I'm never going to be Michael Jordan with Michael Jordan's DNA in 1996, 1992, 1988. It's impossible. This is life. Now, what we can do is we can learn and we can say there's some wisdom here. But I have some respect for that man, because he was like, listen, if you don't agree with the way I did things, you ain't gotta follow me.
See, I think that's
tough. Like,
difficult though, man. That's difficult because it's just like, you know, when we talk about pro sports, like getting up and leaving is just not an option for some people, right? Like whether you get drafted to that team, you know, BJ Armstrong, Horace Grant, he's a perfect example. Like he and Mike have an awful relationship, right? Horace was drafted there. He can't just pick up and leave, but when he had the opportunity to, he did, right? He left for Orlando solely because of how Mike treated him. And so, you know, I think in the team atmosphere, especially when we put the term leader out there, I think maybe that's where I have an issue with, because I think a lot of people are making winning synonymous with being a good leader, right? And that's not, and I see that a lot, right? Like he was a great leader. He led them to victory.
A great
necessarily
is
mean
the word, though.
Go ahead.
Effective. Was he an effective leader?
And the other thing, a leader in sports too. It's not a leader in life.
Right. And I'm not negating your point, but I'm saying when you define great, do you mean was he an ethically responsible leader? Nah. Right? So was his morality like Greg was saying, you know what I mean? Are we looking at it in a way, you're looking through a mental health lens, right? So when you look back through a mental health lens, you can identify certain things which bother you.
And I can say, I can admit to that. Like, it's difficult to take that hat off. You know, when you're watching these things and you're reading these things, it's, you know, it can be difficult at times.
And you shouldn't. But I think you also have to have the conversation in a nuanced way. When you use the word great, you're not just saying, was he a great leader? Like some people look at it, they're saying, well, was he an effective leader? Yes. Was his leadership style abusive? Yes. So does that mean that he wasn't effective and he wasn't great? You know what I mean? How are we defining great? I think the way you define great, you're saying that if you're an abusive leader, then your greatness diminishes in your eyes. Like that's a fair statement.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Kyle. Go ahead, Mike. And then we go again.
Greatness in sports, when you say we're putting leadership on winning, greatness in sports is winning. Like there's no other way around it with greatness in sports. It's about achieving things that you go into a season wanting to achieve. And like, listen, this kind of goes back to what Zane said about like, we appreciate like aggression. Listen, I appreciate Tom Brady on the sidelines way more than I appreciated Donovan McNabb on the sidelines smiling and laughing when Tom Brady grabbing his guy by the face mask and going off and being like, you got to get in the game. So like we can't look at it in the span of anything besides sports.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. Just because, you know, we were having this discussion about how it's being perceived, right? The style of leadership. We know with Tom Brady, when he did that, we know how he was lauded. He's an amazing leader. He's the best thing since pants with pockets. And then Odell Beckham does it. It did the same exact thing. And he's looked at as being a cancer and problematic. And we understand, the role that race plays, the construct of race plays in that and what have you. So I just thought that was, interesting because I think, Tom Brady gets a pass that Jordan right now and throughout his career didn't necessarily get, even though I think Jordan got passes, if that makes sense.
Help.
I was going to say.
Why'd you say help?
Yeah.
Bill lost me. He lost me. You could say.
No, I mean, that was a very weird statement to say that.
So you had the white man doing one thing, then you had the black man doing something else, right? And we understand how, why that is the way that is. and how Jordan was skewered. It was just me pointing out the obvious.
No, but you were saying he got a pass on some things, and then you said he didn't get a pass.
So in the grand scheme of things, he didn't get skewered all like that, right? Because he got a pass because he won.
Right.
Ultimately, he did get his feet held to the fire at various times for various behaviors that were unbecoming of one would call a professional.
Okay.
So here's a question. I got two questions. Here you go. If anybody on this team of Chicago Bulls sucker punches Michael Jordan, they just hit it. They blew a gasket. Do they get traded the next day?
Oh yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Okay, so that says one thing. That's an indicator that winning, unfortunately, in a capitalistic society is more important than the healthy human beings. All right, that's one. Two, here's another question for you. If what Michael Jordan was doing to push people to do their best was being done in a corporate office or a nonprofit or a classroom, what would you call it?
Workplace harassment.
Yeah, lawsuit. That's what we would call it. But and it brings up a point. We were having a conversation prior to this with some brothers, and it was just like these things are acceptable in the realm of sports. A lot of these, we're talking about the violence, not only the physical violence, but the verbal abuse that takes place. It's been normalized, for centuries within this specific field. And so that's the reason why it continues to persist. Steve, what's that experience like with those athletes at where you've coached, right? And you've coached, Greg, we can keep it real. It's different tiers of Division I schools, right? You got your Temples, you got your Pitts, and you got your Penns. What have you seen? Just being in those different places when it comes to this idea of coachability, when it comes to this idea of being a good teammate, sportsmanship. Have you seen any differences amongst these arenas?
Yeah, I would say a lot of times people look at Penn and they'll think, oh, it's a bunch of nerds on a team. And even though it's Ivy League, so the standard is a little bit higher than some other schools as far as academically, it's ballers on the team. Like it's kids who, live and die by basketball, and they happen to also be some pretty good students. So
listen, real quick, before you go, I just wanted to your point. Like we talk about Michael Jordan. I love Michael Jordan at Penn.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan at Penn was no joke.
Yeah, Michael Jordan at Penn was a great dude. Great player too. So I think that's kind of like a misconception is that like when we'll play this past year, we played Alabama, beat them. We played, it's like they call them like gimme games for the other teams. Like they pay us money to go there and we'll upset them. We beat Alabama. We beat Providence. Last year, we beat Villanova. And so they're competitive dudes on the team. I've actually had certain issues almost discipline-wise with some of the players at Penn. And I want to bring this up in a second with another question, but I want to stay on topic for now in that I think I noticed the main difference with when I was with Temple football, when Al Golden was the head coach between 2007 to 2009, and I was just starting my strength and conditioning career as a grad assistant. And there was a certain, like he had to set certain standards for them. I used to have to go and do bed check at night to make sure guys weren't out wilding out. I used to have to do breakfast check to make sure players were eating their meals. And there were certain players that didn't go, I guess they didn't all the way buy into his system, and they eventually got let go. And one of them is someone I still talk to this day, and he spent many years in the NFL. So I think I noticed the main difference there on the football side of things. I think sometimes there's with certain athletes, there might be a lack of coachability and a certain level of entitlement. And it's our job as coaches to what I've tried to learn is to try to have autonomy within bounds. So I have rules and I have standards, but when it comes to certain things in particular, like in the weight room, is I'll try to more recently, as I've grown as a coach, I've tried to get a little bit of their feedback. It's not like, hey, we're going to do everything 100% your way, but hey, what are some ideas that you have? You're the one who's out on the court. You're the one who has to take care of your body. You know, do you like doing a trap bar deadlift better than a conventional, or do you like safety bar squat? Or sometimes I'll get their input on certain exercises. But one of the things I think with Mike is he was a jerk a lot of times, but you also seen him joking around a lot with his teammates. And I think part of the culture, even in basketball, particularly basketball, is like they talk trash constantly to each other. And it's almost like it's just big brother, little brother. Like it's just part of how it is, constantly getting on one another. And I see that when I'm watching this documentary, as far as that's how he was behind the scenes all the time, even when they're on the plane playing cards. Even when they're back in the training room getting the ankle tape, whatever they're doing, it seemed like he was always busting on his teammates in kind of a loving type of way, like they were just joking around. And it was kind of, that's how it was perceived. So thanks for letting me spit on that topic. But I didn't know anyone's thoughts on the Scottie Pippen stuff. Maybe that's just how Mike portrayed it. But when he didn't want to go in the game, when the play wasn't drawn up for him, as a coach, I've had certain times where athletes basically said, like, no, I'm not doing what you're telling me in the weight room, and have had to get into some verbal confrontations at times in my career. Not many, but there's been a few. And just feeling for Phil on that, Phil Jackson, as far as like that's a tough spot to put a coach. Yeah. Very tough. And I wasn't feeling that, but at the same time, it's Michael's narrative, and it does seem like there's a little bit of a bad spin on Scottie, like, oh, he was selfish for only making $2 million when he's one of the best players in the NBA. When Michael's making 30, it's easy for him to say. So yeah. I don't know if anyone had any thoughts there.
I think you made some great points. I think when we talk about, you know, the humor aspect of Mike, I saw it completely different. I looked at it as bullying, right? I looked at it as a form of bullying.
That goes on though a lot in sports.
Yeah.
It goes on, and it's not. I don't think it's a good thing though. It's part of this accepted culture because we're winning, but it's not a good thing. I've seen it happens with seniors and freshmen. Yeah, there's like it's like basically hazing in a certain sense.
Yeah, and it's one of those things in a winning locker room, right? It's you can take it; it happens. But if they weren't winning, people would have got shipped out of there left and right. You know, I was that little small portion they did on Scott Burrell, and you know his friends came to visit him, and the two white guys came to visit him, and he was you came to see this guy, and it was just like calling him a hoe and all of these different things. And Scott Burrell's response to it wasn't one that appeared like it was just joking, right? Because his body language was showing what it was like. So I just thought it was, you know, when we talk about the humor aspect, yes, it could be a way to diffuse, but it also could be a way of keeping this, you know, this tension that exists, keeping it going. When we talk about the Scottie Pippen thing, I think we talk about, you know, you brought up effective leadership. Right. And what being an effective leader looks like. And in that moment, that wasn't it. On that type of stage, he didn't show what being an effective leader of men looked like. I can't say I blamed him. Because you call a play for this foreigner who we torched in the and for those who don't know, Scottie Pippen, and I didn't know this until yesterday. For those who don't know, it was what was that, like the 95 playoffs, something like that? They were playing against Orlando and 94, 95 playoffs, one of them. They were playing against, I believe it was Orlando, and Phil Jackson called the play for Tony Kukoc. And Scotty's the man. Jordan is gone. And Scotty said, fuck, I ain't going in there. It was just like, whoa. I sat and watched that. I said, no. I swear I didn't know that happened.
You neither. And, you know, Kukoc's son went to Penn. So I trained him for a year or so. He got injured. Wow. Something happened. He was already injured, and then it was like a year and a half. But his son went to Penn. He was on a basketball team.
Yeah.
Crazy.
and Kukoc hit the game-winning shot, and Scotty had to, apologize to his teammates, and it was a learning experience to him for sure. But yeah, no, that was. Go ahead.
I wanted to say, I think it's something beautiful about what Bill Cartwright was willing to say, right? Like he went in there. This is the same, and I think they did a great job with the documentary. If you're talking about telling the story, you take Bill Cartwright, who also said, I would end his career if he would ever treat me in that way, talking about Jordan. But in this situation where last thing you want to do is show your teammates that you're quitting. And then to quit on them is a completely different thing. It's one thing to walk out of practice pissed off, right? It's a whole nother thing to be in the last seconds of a game and the whole city knows you're the best player and the coach wants to use you as a decoy, but you can't get your way out your ego. That's a whole different type of level of quitting. But Cartwright came in after it was done. I don't know if they would have won. He would have did this differently. But he came in and he started crying. He said, and he preached to Pippen how much we need you. And then Pippen broke down.
Yeah.
Those are the stories we don't hear enough of. We don't dwell enough on. We don't sit enough on. I thought that was the most beautiful moment I've probably seen yesterday. Or I'll say almost out of the whole documentary, to be honest, because I'm a fan of, just take the mask off sometimes. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
Right? And so here Cartwright comes in and says, and then Pippen, they have this moment where Pippen never would do that again. And that's why Bill Cartwright was able to be assistant coach in the last 3 championships, because he had earned such a camaraderie and respect from these players. And probably some way they needed him to calm Jordan down at certain points anyway. But I thought that was beautiful.
Now, so just to piggyback off of that, right? That particular season, right? Scottie Pippen was the man all season, right? So, that saying of, one moment can define you, right? And it's unfortunate for Scottie Pippen because I remember that season. I don't remember the moment, right? I think we all kind of we were fans, so we weren't privy to that moment or the details of that moment. We'll say we might have, because I think the announcer said like, "Oh, Scotty's not on the floor," and that's it, right? But Scotty was killing for that whole year, and unfortunately, he was just defined by that one moment. But the saying where they say like, where do you stand in the moments of was it conflict, or I'm probably butchering the phrase, right? But Scotty knew he was wrong, right? Yeah. So in that moment, or the moment when he had a chance to, he apologized to his team. There was some humility, right? And that's the thing that, all of us, right? None of us are perfection. We're all in the process of being perfected, right? So when you're at a moment when you've been called out, when you've been critiqued, when you're in this position of power, and somebody says, okay, Scottie Pippen, you were wrong, XYZ. Carpenter, you were wrong, XYZ. What's your response to that? You know what I mean? And when we look at Michael Jordan and his leadership style, like it's like the moment that you get called out on something, you fight back out, almost like out of your brokenness. You know what I mean? Like he wants to get you back as opposed to just taking the critique, right? So now we're still talking about his leadership style, his, whatever, right? We're still talking about that. Where do you stand the moment that somebody, and whether it's somebody on equal, a counterpart to you, whatever, but whenever Michael Jordan ever got like critiqued or, some type of something, it's always like, no, I challenge you. I remember I saw this interview, with Kobe. I think he did it with Steven Jackson or whatever. And the other guy, they had like a podcast and they had Kobe on there, like
Matt Barnes.
Yep. And they were talking about, because that's just always kind of like the thing that Kobe always heard. Like, oh yeah, the second coming of Michael Jordan. You're Michael Jordan, 2, And Kobe was very, very clear. He was like, oh, no. The distinction between me and Mike is Mike's just like a maniac competitive, no matter the arena. Like with Kobe, it was just like, okay, on the court, I'm XYZ, But Mike was just like insane, competitive dude. All right, let's bet on golf. Oh, let's bet on, like they showed the scene where he was like pitching quarters. Oh, let's bet on pitching. Like what? What's going on here? You know what I mean? And I just don't know. I don't know. Like when we saw Mike get critiqued or get challenged or get, in those moments when it was like, well, Mike, nah, you might have been wrong on this one, Mike. You know what I mean? His response, I'm just not a fan of. Like I don't think I've ever seen Mike in a moment of like vulnerability, humility. I don't think these are things that Mike even has in his character. Like I can't think of a moment where I just look at Mike and I'm like, oh, okay.
You know what? I think when, I think with his dad.
Is that narcissism?
With his dad. With his dad. Yes.
Narcissism.
With the exception of that, can you think of another? I mean, maybe I'm just can't remember it, but I can't.
Why do we have an expectation for everybody to heal? I just want to throw that out.
You got it.
Yeah,
wow.
Come on, Mike. That's that
wow, Mike.
There we go.
It's just, and I think this is something we've got going on with all of our community.
Go ahead, Zane. Write that down.
I just wrote it. down.
But seriously, like we shouldn't expect everybody to get better, right? And like, guess what? Like that brokenness that Kavanaugh referenced is probably where that fire came from, right? That's what fueled him. And I think sometimes the things that can be seen as negative or almost controversial are the things that are strengths at other times, right? Because listen, like I'll use myself as a reference. Like when I was strung out on drugs, right, and doing whatever I had to do to get through the day, it gave me a certain skill set to survive, right? And I developed a certain set of skills in a really tough scenario that I still use on a given day, right? That need to like rely on myself and get through and get like forward was grown out of something that would be looked at as negative, but it's still a part of my person today that allows me to succeed. Do you know what I mean? So we can't lift someone up for their greatness and then also bring them down and be like, you could have been a little softer and nicer sometimes, you know?
Yeah. All of this is definitely in hindsight. And I brought this up like in my post, like Michael Jordan is the antithesis of what we want our children to be, right? And what we teach our children. Everything that we do, to be kind to others and all of these things. This is what we tell our children not to be. Do not be like Michael Jordan in that capacity. Yeah, no, we do have this expectation, especially in 2020, where everybody is, and that's why I hate that narrative of everybody is broken, right? Like because it comes from a deficit perspective, and Mike has his flaws and that. But he's human, he's fallible. And that's what I try to bring to the forefront and try to remember that he's a human being at the end of the day. And his journey is completely different and what it takes for him to get to that point. And now he can be one of those figures again, that we look at and say, listen, here are some positive characteristics, but here are some unhealthy characteristics that you do not want because it doesn't serve you. It might serve you in the sports arena, but it's probably not going to serve you outside of that. And regardless, you have to step outside of that sports arena at some point, right? And it had me bringing up this idea of where was Juanita Jordan in this entire documentary?
Ain't that crazy? That's crazy. Like, that's crazy when you think about that. Like,
what she get? One mention, I think I heard.
I don't even think there was a mention.
Yeah, I saw her on stage with him when he retired, but that was it.
Their marriage was a business plan. I'm sorry, y'all.
I'm not to be sorry about it. Ain't nothing to be sorry. I think
she. I don't know what this. I remember hearing the stories as a kid, but I don't want to go too far off the topic. I do recall her being like, I was sticking it out. I think she did an interview with Oprah, maybe. She might have did an interview with Oprah back then. And I think she had just talked about like, I promised to stay for the kids. And get through this. But I can imagine he was so obsessed over basketball. I don't think he could succeed or win that marriage at that point. Not in that point in his life. I mean, his wife was basketball. His wife was the game. He could be one person in another arena and then go outside with the cameras and be like, let's get these endorsements, you know. Who knows? He might be doing good at his second or third marriage, whatever, which one he's on, you know. But I think to a lot of points is, you know, none of us, and it's a lot of pressure on being humans, especially in like this time of PC, which comes around like every 20, 25 years. You know, it's a lot of pressure on human beings where we are already big brothering ourselves. We are the all-watching eye now. We are all judging each other, and it is extremely an unhealthy situation for a lot of us to be engaging with social media, to be, you know, waiting. Some people are just watching, you know, wait. Some anxiety attacks come from people's fear of judgment. They know what's coming eventually. Some people never express themselves because there's this constant open channel to judging people, especially online. So, you know, we've seen a lot of young people suffer from that, a lot of college students, a lot of professional adults. It is really, really challenging. And to see him get through that and be resilient with all that stuff in his face, you know, I know there's something with him. You just like, yo, just give me that part though. Like the ability to block things out. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there is some good here, but then there's some stuff we can take and we can say, we may not have to throw it away, but, you know, pick it apart and say, okay, if I'm in that situation, how do I respond differently, right? If I feel disrespected or if I feel like somebody is not giving their all, how do I change my approach and my response to that moment? And maybe that's what this just is for all of us, is trying to figure out how to be the best human beings we can when we're put in certain dynamics, certain scenarios, and move on from there. Because, you know, picking apart the past, you know, trying to create a better future is, you know, how further can we get?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's a teachable moment. It's a teachable moment. And to the point of, you know, the impact of social media. When I did the hashtag You Good Man group last Wednesday with regards to Ahmaud Arbery, it was a young kid in there, about, you know, 18, and you know, he was a basketball player in Florida. I didn't know who he was. And so I guess his coach was on there. It's like, yo, he was the Mr. Basketball in the state of Florida. So I'm like, what? I go Google him. You know what I mean? I'm like, yo, this really that kid. You know what I mean? Going to Central Florida, what have you. And that was the advice, right? And he seemed to understand the pitfalls that social media can cause, right? And how that not only can influence his you know, his mental and emotional wellness, but just how difficult it can make his life trying to navigate it as being someone who's, I mean, listen, he's a celebrity, right? He's a celebrity in that aspect because he is a sportsman. And so that's what makes me look at LeBron even more and say, bruh, I have no idea how you did this. Right, like you were here for the start of all of this, right? I remember watching his high school games in my dorm room. Carmelo Anthony too, to a certain extent, but definitely LeBron, and that's why when we talk about, you know, it's hard to live up to expectations, let alone exceed them, right? And so I think with LeBron, and this is why I give him so much credit, because he does have that ability to understand the impact of social media. He does have this level of consciousness that Mike never seemed to have, especially in public. He never seemed to have it for whatever reason, to maintain his pristine image or what have you. So I think what I also come away with watching this documentary is just like, yo, LeBron, like, yo, you really that dude. You really that dude. And I don't think he gets enough credit with regards to that.
Let me speak on something, Phil. I think with all of this, we're talking about, like, you know, Jordan and healing and brokenness and mental health. I think I'm not necessarily a mental health expert, but what I do see here is an uncanny ability to interchannel his focus like no other athlete I've ever seen, ever. And there wasn't social media, but there was, you saw like the line of reporters everywhere he went, people crowding the hotel. I mean, just think, you wake up in the morning, you go down to get breakfast in the hotel, and there's swarms of people trying to get your autograph. You never had, even when he was crying about his dad, he was on the ground crying after winning the championship, and there's reporters there filming him crying. And I do think that's heightened with social media. I think it would be even worse now, but he was able to weather that and still, in my opinion, his mental toughness or mental performance is uncanny. Is crazy how focused he would be. And then after losing, like, even I know myself, I lose and I'm like, it gets in my head. I'm like, okay, this is a spiral that's going to lead to worse performance. For him, it was like, okay, BJ Armstrong made a shot. All right, I'm going to drop 37 in the first half of the next game. All right, we lost one game. All right, I'm going to go off the next game. And he would all the time. Like he has the it.
Yeah, it's that resilience and that bounce back.
He doesn't quite have, and that's what really separates him, in my opinion. And I don't want to get in the whole discussion on that, but his mental toughness in that regard, or I don't know if it's mental. It's probably not mental health. It's mental toughness in the moment for sports is better than anyone I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think what you're identifying is both the gift and the curse, right? A gift and a curse, that emotional, that ability to disconnect when necessary, right? And to still perform. Again, missing the last shot, some people might hold on to that for a long time. So he'd have resilience in that aspect, but how did it hinder him outside of that and his ability to connect with others on a healthy emotional level? So I think for him, it was like a gift and a curse because it aided him in being able to bounce back or to conjure up false stories about LeBradford Smith or something like that. Like just lying, like, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's, it's such a, he's such an interesting and polarizing figure. I'm interested to see, I know they had a camera crew followed Kobe around for his last year. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like, because that does bring in social media. That does bring in a whole lot of other dynamics and factors that weren't necessarily present with Mike. And then I'm sure LeBron he probably got a camera crew all the time with him. So I think it's interesting. It's coming up on 9:15.
I want to go back to something. Michael, I wanted to respond to why do we have an expectation that folks have to heal? And I think a couple of things came up. One, on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, I think that's the goal, right? I think that's something that we're working on from another level. I think on an existential level, that not healing is not healing is a threat. And I'm hoping what you were getting at was, why do we have to cancel somebody who hasn't gotten to the point where they're trying to heal? You know what I mean? And why isn't our response something that is restorative? You know what I mean? Why do we have to dismiss them or chop them up? And why can't we see them like you said, why can't we see this person who hasn't gone towards healing? You know what I mean? All right.
And no, you're fine, Zane, you're fine. I promise you.
And what does trying to heal look like too? Like we have these conceptions that trying to heal has to be this 0 to 100. Like you have to be overhauling your personhood. You've got to be changing your identity. You've got to be becoming that person you want to be. But sometimes trying to heal is very small, but it's still a movement.
Right. So that's one thing. I'm big into the power of questions, Mike. So it seemed like, so you asked that question. What were you trying to get at? What was like the point of like, it's a very powerful question.
I think there's a certain duality that exists in our society right now where we have an expectation for everybody to be pursuing health and wellness and goodness. And these are all loaded terms that are so complex and dependent, like what Greg brought up earlier about language being dependent on culture. It's such loaded phrases that when we're constantly talking about healing and fixing ourselves, it's results driven. We need to see the change. We have to see you become that better person, but that isn't what healing always looks like. sometimes we don't see our healing until years later and be like, wow, I was healing back then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just, that's why I brought it up, because it's a lot of like, where's your results?
Yeah.
Why don't you want to heal? Right? Like those kind of questions.
Yeah. And when you say, why don't you want to heal? It makes me think of just that idea of, you don't know what it's going to take from me in order to heal, right? In order to get to this point of where I'm at a place where we're quote unquote healed. You know, we're talking about bringing up various traumas that we've experienced throughout our lives. Like, it's a difficult process. Like, what we ask people to do in a 120 character tweet or in an Instagram meme or on a Facebook post is super easy, right? It's super easy, but nobody really wants to understand what it truly means to put in that work to heal, because it might not be pretty, right? It might look like some violence towards other people, right? Because we're talking about bringing up raw emotions. We're talking about just bringing up different things. So yeah, it's easy to say we want the tangible, the tangible strategies to heal. You know, we want the self-care, we want the therapy, but nobody knows what that first session is like. You know what I mean? People don't really care about that. And so again, it's become trendy. It's become cliche, this idea of, although necessary. See, this is, the double talk, you know what I mean? But because it is necessary, because when you see it in yourself and you could potentially see it for somebody else and how they could benefit from it, how much greater their lives can be. But then there we go. We're projecting and putting our expectations onto others. And so we just need to mind our damn business. You know? when it comes
it is necessary, though, to a certain degree. I just think sometimes we need to remember that defense mechanisms carry people through trauma. So when we're always trying to remove them and being like, come on, it's time to heal, they might still need those defense mechanisms to navigate life. And it's okay to still have somewhat maladaptive defense mechanisms in our lives, man.
You know what? You bring up a great point, right? I saw this.
Like watching your hands.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, what was that again, Michael? Say that one more time.
You got
Which thing?
Yeah.
About sometimes we may need the
word that you
maladaptive defense mechanisms.
Okay. That's
I don't like
that's good too.
I don't like using loaded terms like bad or negative.
Yeah. It's a social work thing, man.
Yeah.
Social work thing.
Y'all got it. I was just sitting here like, malad. How you spell that?
No, but it brings up a great point, because I mean, let's look no further than addiction. When the world was going wild, when they made the beer distributor an essential business, it's just like, no, in order for some people to survive, they have to drink beer every day, right? They have to drink 10 beers. They can't just go cold turkey. If they go cold turkey, they'll die, right? And so when we talk about this idea of maintaining these defense mechanisms until we could slowly start integrating in some other skills. But in the meantime, keep that up, right? Keep that up. Yeah, we look at it as you're hurting yourself, but ultimately we need you to be around here in order to get you to the point of whether it's recovery or healing or what have you. We need you around, right?
This turning into a weed commercial? Is this a commercial about weed?
No, it's not weed, but let me know, Dane. I got some here. I got some for you. Let me know. No, listen, brothers, I appreciate you all for tuning in. Wait, what's this? Let me put Troy Love comment up. Why does everyone have an expectation to try to heal? You have to see resilience as a skill or strength. To go towards resilience, to acknowledge internal discomfort without setting off defense mechanisms.
That's my cousin.
Oh, word. All right. Shout out to Troy. I see. It was kind of wordy like you, Zane. It's like, nah. Listen, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you brothers coming through for this. I'm a little tired, so y'all held me down during this. For those who are watching, I want you to tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow I will have Pennsylvania State Representative Joanna McClinton on, and we're gonna have this conversation, man. I don't pull no punches. I say what I got to say, right? I want to understand what's the purpose of black folk voting, right? I want to understand why I shouldn't go semi-dissident or full dissident. I want to understand a lot of these things.
You going politics now? What's going on, Phil? What
Jay said is politics as usual. Wow, man. You know what I mean? It's bigger than Nino Brown. So I'm gonna try to be. You know, I'm gonna ask some questions about the new mail-in voting and all of that, but I want to get to the point, man, of what's the purpose, what's the point of all this? You know what I mean? So make sure y'all tune in tomorrow at 8 p.m. Any parting words?
So will you vote on a donation basis? Like if I donate to Quantify, will you vote? Like what's the number?
John, him to vote?
Yo, he bribed
you. I mean, since you see, this is where I wish I had Umar, man. You know what I mean? I could bring him up, but I'll put the ticker across if anybody want to donate to the show.
For you to vote. For you to vote.
For me to vote. I can't make no guarantees, brother. Nothing in life is guaranteed, but death, you know. And we got some brothers on here. We got Chance and we got Believe in Steven. They might tell you it's a guarantee on the other side. You know what I mean? So so no, before I get out, you know, if y'all brothers want to tell how they all can be contacted, give out your socials, what have you. I guess I'll start with Zane out of socials. Steve, go ahead, Steve. Give out your
yeah. Pretty much everything is at Believe in Steven. So it's like believing with no G and then Steven with the PH. Believe in Steven. So if you know how to spell, you should be good. I know believing is one of those words people mess up a lot though.
Before the E, except after C, something neighboring way. Yeah, I got it. Go ahead, Greg. You want to get your info?
Yeah. Y'all can just reach me. Greg Corbin Speaks, GregCorbin Speaks, SPEAKS, and that's at Gmail and also my website, gregcorbinspeaks.com, as well as on IG. This was fun.
No doubt. What about you, Kyle?
So everything is all Green District Media. Green District Media, Facebook, Instagram, Green District Media website. Check out the work there. Yeah.
It's on you, Mike. Now, Mike, I know your name.
Yeah, no, but I don't really have a social media presence, man. I got an Instagram, but I'm really just in here because I appreciate people coming together for conversation that means something, that has substance, and that's working towards something. Simple as that. Yeah.
And as always with me, you can hit me up, Phil_Roundtree. Go buy the merch, Quantify LLC. That's Q as in quail, UAD as in dog, EFY LLC.net. Shout out to, pandemic unemployment coming through. I needed all of that. So my mortgage, they don't take my house. That's it. So I appreciate you all. Again, tune in tomorrow for State Representative Joanna McClinton, man. I appreciate you all. Peace. Thanks, y'all.